and welcome to the Plant School podcast. I'm Rachel Tenney, and here we learn all about plants, how they work, how to care for them, and it's all taught in a way that anyone from beginner to expert can listen to, understand, and enjoy. So I hope that you will join me in Plant School. Hello and welcome to the Plant School podcast, or welcome back to the Plant School podcast if you've been here before. So today we're going to be going over peace lilies, and I'm not just going to tell you how to care for them. I'm going to tell you all about their history, what they symbolize, where they came from, all of that good stuff. And before I do, every episode, I announce 2 giveaway winners to win a bottle of Prop Drops, which is a water propagation aid for all those little propagations that you are trying to grow in water, and then a bottle of Leaf Shine. This little package comes from Market Botany. They've been so kind to kind of sponsor these giveaways for the Plant School podcast. So grateful for them. And this giveaway today is a little different because, well, I made a mistake. This is what happened. I publish my podcast via Spotify, and they kind of have stopped the Q&A section. It doesn't exist anymore. They got rid of it. And so I'm in a bit of a jam. I used to take an answer from the Q&As, and I'm so sad that they're gone. So I tried publishing a poll on the last episode, and I can't see anyone's usernames from whoever answered that poll. And so it is unfortunately useless to me. So in the meantime, I'm trying to figure out perhaps a different way to do giveaways, because I really liked catering to those who listened on Spotify and then those who listened on Apple Podcasts. So I'm working on a solution right now. Hopefully by the next episode, I will have figured out perhaps a new giveaway system. I'm really not sure. If you have like a genius idea that you just can't help but share, you are more than welcome to email me. You can email at tennyplants@gmail.com. That's TENNEY plants. But otherwise, I will figure it out myself. So for today, I am just going to choose 2 people who have left a review on Apple Podcasts. I'm choosing 2 since I can't choose the other one from Spotify this week, unfortunately. And so the first review that has been left on Apple Podcasts is from Tuttle Twins Fans. They said, "This is my favorite podcast. I've actually never done a review before. My favorite plants are the carnivorous ones. I wish I could give a higher rating." Thank you so much for that sweet review, and thank you for taking the time to give your first review ever. That means a lot to me. If that was you, Tuttle Twins Fans, email me at tennyplants, and I will get that package from Market Botany sent your way. And then our other review that is going to be another giveaway winner this week, their username is The Magic of Macy. They said, "I've been listening to this podcast for a year." Wow, thank you. "And it never ceases to inspire me. I love how approachable all the advice is, and I enjoy learning about the history of certain plants as well. Anytime I want to listen to something cozy yet informative, I turn to this podcast. It always makes me happy. I've been wanting an alocasia for a while now, but the recent episode made me all the more confident to take the plunge and get one. Can't wait for more episodes." Thank you so much. I hope caring for that alocasia is going well for you. The Magic of Macy, if that was you, email me at tennyplants@gmail.com, and I will send that giveaway package your way. If any of you are listening and you want to check out Prop Drops or Leaf Shine from Market Botany, you are more than welcome to, and I actually have a code for you to use that will give you 10% off. The code is Plant School Podcast, no capitals, no spaces, and that will give you 10% off your order. Just go to marketbotany.com/shop. All right, let's dive into this week's episode. And I'm so excited for this episode since it is one that I covered super early on in this podcast. 4 years ago, I want to say. And again, for anyone that's new here, my first 50 episodes, they're gone. I deleted them because they were so different from what they are now. They didn't really dive in deep, which I really try to do now. And so it's gone, and now I finally get the chance to redo it, and there's some really fun information about peace lilies. In my mind, this is a houseplant that's underrated. No one really talks about it, but it is one that I hold dear to my heart, especially since it was the very first houseplant that I ever owned. So, starting with the question of what is a peace lily, it's a tropical evergreen plant in the arum family. It's not related to true lilies at all. In fact, it looks quite different from all the true lilies that are out there. And most peace lilies, the houseplant varieties, they're about 16 inches tall, somewhere in that range, but there are actually larger cultivars that can get up to 6 feet tall. That was something that was new to me, probably because they don't usually carry them in big box stores, but there's a lot of varieties of peace lilies, and I will talk about them in a little bit. So they produce these white spathes or flowers, and the white part that you see on a peace lily that looks like a sort of petal, it's actually a modified leaf, and it's called a bract. And that pokey sort of stick in the middle, that's its spadix. And on that spadix is where the true flowers are located. They are on each little bump of the spadix. The scientific name of a peace lily is Spathiphyllum, and this name actually makes a lot of sense. So spath means spoon, and phyll means leaf, so it translates to spoon leaf. Its other common names besides peace lily is spath or white flag. I have to say I've never heard anyone use those before. I think peace lily is probably what 99% of people use when they refer to this plant. Moving on to my next question, I love to go over what they symbolize. So the peace lily has a lot of symbolism because it's been involved in human history for quite a while. So it can symbolize forever at peace, or just simply peace, prosperity, and being peaceful. I hope you guys are getting the theme here. It's not too hard to pick up on. And the white flower in particular can be a signal of a white flag or of peace if you were to cut that off and give it to someone. The peace lily is a common gift for housewarmings, for new babies, get well gestures, and occasions of sympathy. People believe that it can hold these possible powers, specifically of, you guessed it, peace, and it can help attract positive energy to the home and to your business, wherever you end up placing this plant. And it's been closely associated throughout its history to the Virgin Mary and with Easter. Chinese culture, actually, they have used it as a gift on special occasions and as like a gesture of good wishes. It's a very common plant to give. While Japanese culture, they believe the peace lily to have healing properties, and they use it in traditional medicine. Moving on to where they originate, the peace lily natively grows in Central and South America, and you can also find it natively growing in Mexico and the Western Pacific, and it kind of just loves the forest floor. That is where it thrives. All right, let's go to my favorite question of every episode, and it is, what is their history? So starting with the earliest history that I could find, the ancient Aztecs, they considered the peace lily to be a symbol of purity, and they would use it in religious ceremonies. They believed the shape and the color of the leaves represented the arrow and the shield of one of their gods, Quetzalcoatl. I could be saying that wrong, but that is my best attempt. And then during colonial times, Spanish conquistadors, they were fascinated by the beauty and the elegance of this plant, so they eventually brought it back to Europe as kind of this exotic treasure. When it was first formally described, we know that people knew about it for a while, but when it was first formally described by a scientist, it was Heinrich Wilhelm Schott, and he put it in his book. It was co-written with him and Stefan Endlicher in their 1832 book called Melitemata Botanica. From the title of that book, you can probably tell that they were not American botanists. They were Austrian. And Heinrich, he specifically described Spathiphyllum lancifolium, which had been previously described by Nicholas Joseph von Hawking in 1790, but he classified it as Dracontium laciifolium. And it was Schott who worked on this new genus of Spathiphyllum, and he pulled in other similar specimens that had been named, but they obviously weren't in the Spathiphyllum genus that didn't exist before Heinrich came along, and he kind of noticed all of these plants look very similar and they would all fit better in this genus, and that's what he did. He successfully expanded Spathiphyllum to 22 species. Today, it sits at 47, so he got almost half of the species that we know today, and it actually remained at 22 for quite a while. Another botanist came along, George S. Bunting. He revised it, he worked on it for his PhD thesis. This was in 1960, and he got it up to a total of 36 species. And over time, new species that have been discovered have been added to that genus to where it is at its 47 of today. And interestingly, there is at least one spathiphyllum that is used as food. It is a Spathiphyllum matitude, and the way they eat it, they pickle in vinegar and eat it like that, or they can cook it with eggs. But the houseplant in your home is not a source of food. It actually can be quite toxic. Again, we will get to that part soon too. And the peace lily is actually in that infamous NASA study where NASA tested a bunch of houseplants to see how well they could clean the air. They found that peace lilies in particular helped clean benzene and formaldehyde from the air. And I have talked extensively about this study and how it doesn't really apply to our homes. I will tell you, though, that does not stop marketers from putting it literally everywhere and shoving it in your face that the peace lily will clean your air and it's such a great plant. Put it in your home, it will take out the benzene and formaldehyde and leave you healthier. But the fact of the matter is that this study does not translate well to our homes. It's not practical or applicable. Here's why. When NASA did this study, it was in an enclosed chamber. No air was going in or out. It was staying put. And in our homes, we have doors, we have windows, people are going in and out. We have AC units and heating units that are constantly exchanging our air. So our plants do not make a significant or measurable difference in an environment where air is being replaced constantly, aka our homes. So though you may see that the peace lily will clean your air and it's amazing and can do that, it is not quite all that it seems. Just so you know, I was realizing too as I was talking about this, I think the episode where I really dove into exactly the science of that study, I think it was in the first 50. So that might be another one that I have to recover and hash out, because I think it is really interesting because it is such a popular thought today, and I really do believe it is because marketers, people selling plants, it's a big selling point for them to tell you that because it makes you feel like you are bringing something healthy into your home when really it's not all that it's cracked up to be. So I might have to go and revisit that one. But the peace lily, they are incredibly popular today still. Like I mentioned a little bit earlier, they do have specialty varieties, like the ones that are 6 feet tall. And though you will not really see them in your garden center, you can usually find them online. So I want to give you guys some examples of some fun peace lily varieties because I hadn't really dove into this before. So there's the Spathiphyllum wallisii, and it is a smaller peace lily. It reaches only about 1 foot tall. There is Spathiphyllum petite. It is smaller than the wallisii, and it is approximately 8 to 10 inches tall. Another variety is Sensation. It is the largest variety that is available. It is capable of growing up to 4 to 6 feet tall in height and in width. This one sounds kind of fun. I don't know if it would fit in my home, but it sounds fun. Another fun variety is Domino. It's a medium-sized variety. It has really attractive variegated leaves. And then there's the Moho Lime, which has lime green foliage, and it would be in the category of being medium-sized as well. So if you just have like your ordinary peace lily, like I do, those might be some fun ones to look up. And when you find them in your stores, you will often notice that they will nearly all be flowering. And this is because the greenhouses that they are being grown in, they will spray peace lilies with gibberellic acid before sale, and it induces flowering in them. And you can even do this yourself. You can buy your own gibberellic acid, and you can induce your peace lily to flower when you want it to. There's also natural ways to do this, but for greenhouses, it makes sense that they have to do this because they need them all flowering at the point of sale because it is attractive and we love flowers, right? And that concludes the history of the peace lily. I'm going to move into the care portion of them. So if you have one, if you're thinking of getting one, this is all the details you need to know to get it to thrive and be happy, starting with the question of how to water a peace lily. So you want to water when the top 1 inch of soil or so feels dry. I never really give timelines because they can be so variable, so just stick your finger in the soil. If the top first inch feels dry, then it probably needs water, and if you keep forgetting to water it, peace lilies are so kind. They will let you know that it needs water. They are absolutely one of the most dramatic plants I've seen. Their leaves will droop right over. It doesn't mean it's dead, but if you give it a good watering and you've gotten it to the point of those droopy leaves, it will perk right back up and be totally fine. I do this all the time. Why? Because I don't know, my brain is other places. I have kids, I'm pregnant, and I just forget. And my peace lily lets me know, like, hey, I'm kind of thirsty, and I think everyone else in this house is too. So honestly, I'm really grateful for my peace lily and in reminding me that it is time to water. But don't be like me, because if you have erratic watering, it can actually cause the leaf tips to turn brown. Also, another cause of brown leaf tips can be not enough humidity, hard water. And if you know that you have hard water, you can use distilled water, filtered water, rainwater. That can really help. I am pretty certain we have hard water where I live, and I have never gotten distilled, filtered, or rainwater, but I know that it is something that people like to do and go the extra mile for when it comes to their plant care. So that's up to you. And if you do feel like it's a humidity issue causing those brown leaf tips, you can place it with other plants to kind of raise the humidity level, or you can get a humidifier. Both of those can kind of help raise the humidity around your peace lily. On the flip side, if you are watering your peace lily too much, it can easily lead to root rot, meaning there's too much water in the soil, and the bacteria that exists naturally in your soil will take advantage of the wet environment and start to eat at the roots and kill the plant. If that happens, you can pull your plant out, trim any roots that are black and mushy, and repot it into some new soil, and just make sure you stay on top of watering your peace lily when that top 1 inch is dry, and no more than that. They also, speaking of overwatering, this is kind of ironic, but they can be grown hydroponically, meaning they can be solely in water. So ideally, they should be suspended above the water line, or you can use, stones or leca so that the leaves and those stems aren't constantly wet, because that can also cause root rot. You just want their roots to be in the water, and they can do quite well there. In fact, I feel like I knew someone who did that in their fish tank. They had a peace lily growing on top and a little fish living around in the roots. So that's something you could do too. When it comes to their lighting, they do prefer bright and direct light. They will do their best there, but it is one of those plants that can tolerate so many lighting conditions. And because of that, they are often marketed as low light plants at your store. You might see it on a little tag saying, "I'm a low light plant." But really, they will be happiest and they will flower most often if they are getting bright and direct light. But because they are so forgiving, you will often see them in corporate interior design, because they are incredibly hardy. They're very forgiving when it comes to lighting situations. So you might be walking around the mall or in a business complex, and it's very common to see peace lilies throughout buildings. If it is getting too much sun, you can get leaf scorch. They look like these brown patches on the leaves, and just move it out of the direct sun. Remove those unsightly leaves. If there's not too many of them, you never want to remove more than 25% of a plant at a time. And then also as a note, they do not like cold drafts or heat drafts. They're kind of temperamental that way. Just a temperature between 55 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 13 to 26 degrees Celsius. That's its ideal range. And you can put them outside in the shade in the summer. They do great above 60 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 15 degrees Celsius. When it starts to get colder than that, though, it is best to bring them back in. And they can be grown outside as an ornamental plant in zones 10 through 12, which is not much of the US. I'm just thinking of the US because that's where I am. because that's basically like Puerto Rico, some parts of Hawaii. So for most of us, they need to stay in our homes in the wintertime. They can be outside in the summer though. All right, let's move on to how to fertilize these plants. So I would recommend using a fertilizer that's a 10-15-10 or something similar. Those numbers are the NPK value, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium value. And the reason why the phosphorus is a little bit higher is because that is what aids in the flowering of a plant. As we know, peace lilies flower. That's what we would like them to do. So finding a fertilizer with that middle number, the phosphorus, having it be a little bit higher is ideal. Too much fertilizer can cause your flowers, that modified bract that we talked about, to be green instead of white. And that is because it's receiving excess nitrogen. So if you notice that, maybe chill out on the fertilizer. Don't give it too much. Too much fertilizer can also lead to fertilizer burn. And if you do notice any adverse signs of your plant is dying, there are brown tips all of a sudden after fertilizing, just flush out the soil. Put your pot under water and let water run through it and drain out, and that will kind of wash away those excess nutrients. Let's go to the next question. How to repot one? What kind of soil does it need? So you want to repot them when the roots are coming out of the drainage holes or they're showing at the top of the soil. Those are very common signs of a plant needing to be repotted. This usually falls like about every 2 to 3 years, not super often. And you want to move it to a pot that's only 1 to 2 inches bigger. You don't want to get the biggest one because that can lead to a lot of just excess sitting wet soil, and it can actually hurt the plant. Most people like to repot their plants in spring just because it is a time of houseplants kind of waking up, having active growth. They're getting more sunlight, and their plants are able to bounce back easier when they are repotted. And if you do see that your peace lily needs to be repotted, they do like a soil that is well draining. Honestly, I'd recommend just like a general houseplant potting mix, and that will serve it really well. All right, I have a few more questions, starting with how to propagate them. So a peace lily is rhizomaceous, meaning that it grows underground stems. So if you want to propagate one, you can pull out your whole peace lily and you can literally break them off and place those pieces in a new pot. This is called crown division. You can do this with a lot of plants. I'm trying to think of like a common outdoor plant. Something like a lavender bush you can do this with. Your ornamental grasses, you can do crown division, where you are literally just splitting them. Outside, you normally do it with a shovel. With a houseplant, you don't need to go that crazy. You can just split it with your hands. But just make sure that each divided piece does have several leaves so that it can support itself and start growing anew. In the houseplant growing industry, they are not usually propagating peace lilies by crown division. They are using micropropagation, where they take just tiny pieces of the peace lily. I'm talking like cellular level of peace lily, and they are able to grow it from there on a sterile medium. It's not very practical for the average homeowner to do this, but that is generally what all the greenhouses are doing to grow peace lilies for you to buy at the store. All right, 2 last questions. First one, are they prone to pests? Unfortunately, there are a few that can get a hold of them. First one is mealybug, especially on the underside of leaves. They love to hide out there. Mealybugs, if you aren't familiar, they're those white little bugs, kind of look like a cottony mass. You can treat them with neem oil. You can wipe them off with rubbing alcohol on some sort of cloth or cotton swab. Peace lilies can also get scale. They are treated the same way as mealybugs, and then spider mites. Spider mites are a little bit trickier because they do build up immunity to whatever you decide to use. They build up immunity quite fast. So I would just recommend trying new things if you have spider mites that will not go away. Try an insecticide, try neem oil, try manually wiping them off, and just kind of switch through those. And then lastly, I just want to give some extra care tips. The first one is some tips on how to get them to bloom, because that is what we all love seeing. So you need sufficient sun and sufficient fertilizer. Those are both really key. And you should note that older plants, they are less likely to bloom. I have a really old peace lily. I have never seen the thing bloom, but I don't give it away because it was my first houseplant and it's near and dear to my heart. But just know that you're not doing anything wrong if you have an old one. They often just won't bloom. Perhaps gibberellic acid could really help. But otherwise, if you have a newer plant, just give it sufficient sunlight, give it its fertilizer, and they should bloom in early summer and continue through the year. Another tip, I kind of mentioned this, they are mildly toxic. They have calcium oxalate in their leaves, and that can cause stomach and respiratory irritation if it is ingested. So if you do have a peace lily, just make sure to keep it out of the reach of pets, of small children, or anything else that you might feel like try and take a bite of your peace lily. And then last tip, their leaves are quite large, so just make sure you dust them every once in a while to aid in photosynthesis. I love dusting my peace lily because it is so satisfying. They turn out so green and shiny after doing so, and it is something you want to do, I don't know, maybe every 2 months or so. If you're me, every 6 months. I am really painting myself as a lazy houseplant owner. I think it's just the time of life that I'm in, okay? So hopefully you'll cut me a break. Anyways, that is all I have for you on how to care for your peace lily and the history of the peace lily. Thank you so much for being here, for listening. I really do appreciate you, and I hope that you will join me in 2 weeks for a brand new episode of the Plant School podcast. Spoiler alert, I'm kind of excited for it. It's one of my favorite types to record, and I hope to have you there. Thank you so much for being here and for listening to the Plant School podcast. I hope that you will join me for our next episode. And if you would like to support this podcast and keep it going, there's a link down in the show notes of this episode where you can donate to this podcast, and I really appreciate all that help. Or you can go to my merch store, which is also linked in the notes of this episode, and you can find some really cool plant-related shirts and stickers. And if you want to support the podcast but spend no money, feel free to share it with a friend, leave a review. All these things greatly help me out and allow me to keep doing this. Again, thank you so much for listening and for being here at the Plant School podcast.